Hello, we're here to read. It is the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Some of you probably are Black Friday'd out. I am not a shopper, so that is not part of my tradition. I'm trying to get hyped up to decorate some. That's also not something I enjoy, but I think it'll make me have a project and feel happier to decorate. Hey, Sid, how are you? I'm getting not excited. I'm getting psyched to decorate the house for Christmas. I have a granddaughter. I mean, I've had one. I know I was just about to ask you. I know you're getting excited about being done, but you've got SAT to get through. So we got to get that done, get that behind you. But my granddaughter's old enough now. She's 3 this year. So she's old enough that like I need to start being that grandmother that is not the Grinch, where she comes over and like, Omi, where are your decorations? Like, honey, I'm just too lazy to do it. So I think I'm gonna have to face and put some things out and make it feel like Christmas at my house. They canceled the finals completely. Like you don't even have to take finals. That's really amazing. Can you believe we're already to December? It's really crazy to me. So I'm kind of excited about where we are in the book. And I know some of you get lost, but we just had this chapter. It was an interesting technique in the plot to reveal the character of Darcy through his own letter of like confession or whatever you want to say for Elizabeth to judge him less, maybe judge him. I don't know if he truly doesn't care if she likes him or not, and he's just trying to set his name straight, or if he really, which by the way, if you're in Discord, that's a new channel. What's in a name? And Sid, have you gone over there? You could add this part into that discussion because I just watched Hamilton this morning. You knew that because I told you that on Discord. But I was really struck by how much the theme in The Crucible and actually in what we're reading in Pride and Prejudice fit about my name. My name matters to me. My name's important to me. And where other times have we seen that theme in literature? So I'm asking people to jump in and say, where has the concept of my name meaning something, my name, holding on, preserving it, my legacy, that sort of thing. What's another story, another novel that has been a theme that's, is that my cousin? I think I've asked you this before. Circular instead of double point needles. You are right. I have already learned that, and I'm changing needles because what I'm working on is a scarf. And I bought the double point needles because we were going to make a pumpkin pattern. And my friend that was teaching me, hey, it's so good to see you, cousin, and with your quilting. But so my friend was going to teach me how to make pumpkins, and she uses the double point needles. Well, I quickly realized I didn't remember how to knit, so I needed to practice. It was really a disaster. I saw her over Thanksgiving and she said, let's get you some longer with an end needle that will knit better. So I appreciate that insight. The circular needles, I think, are what a lot of people use. I need to get some counters and I need to get some markers. I don't have enough. I didn't know there was so much to knitting that you have to have all these gadgets. So I appreciate you coming on and letting me know that. Thank you, Brenda. I'll tell Daddy you said hi. He comes on every now and then and watches. All right. So we were where Darcy, we're talking about themes and name being important, the value of your name. And so that's what Darcy's really trying to save his reputation to Elizabeth. But do you think he has an ulterior motive? I mean, if he really confessed his love for her, do you think he just gets over it that quickly, or is he trying to convince her? I will. I sure will, Brenda. He's doing really well, by the way. He's moved into this place, and although I don't get to see him as often, they've opened up again, so I can see him more than before. But he has friends and a community, and it's really good for him. So, all right. Hey, Boss Sam, I'm fine. Thank you. So let's read. This is page 192. Oh, my glasses fogged up. 192, chapter 36. If Elizabeth, when Mr. Darcy gave her the letter, did not expect it to contain a renewal of his offers, she had formed no expectation at all of its contents. But such as they were, it may be well supposed how eagerly she went through them, and what a contrariety of emotion they excited. That is not a word I even think of as being a real word, contrariety. To be contrary, but contrariety. Interesting. Siddharth, if you're still out there, or someone, look that up and see if it's truly a word. It's spelled, if you don't have the book. I don't know what's happening with my voice. Contrariet. Interesting word. Maybe it'll be on your SAT and then you'll know it. Of emotion they excited. Her feelings as she read were scarcely to be defined. With amazement did she first understand that he had believed any apology to be in his power. Now, this is her reaction to his letter. And steadfastly was she persuaded that he could have no explanation to give which a just sense of shame would not conceal. With a strong prejudice against everything he might say, she began his account of what had happened at Netherfield. She read with an eagerness which hardly left her power of comprehension, and from impatience of knowing what the next sentence might bring, was incapable of tending to the sense of the one before her eyes. His belief of her sister's insensibility she instantly resolved to be false, and his account of the real, the worst objections to the match, made her too angry to have any wish of doing him justice. So the letter didn't make her happier with him. She's really ticked at him. He expressed no regret for what he had done which satisfied her. His style was not penitent, but haughty. He's very proud still. It was all pride and insolence. Not as good of a title as Pride and Prejudice, is it? Pride and Insolence. But when his subject was succeeded by his account of Mr. Wickham, when she read with somewhat clearer attention a relation of events which, if true, must overthrow every cherished opinion of his worth, and which bore so alarming an affinity to his own history of himself, her feelings were yet more acutely painful and more difficult of definition. Astonishment, apprehension, and even horror oppressed her. She wished to discredit it entirely, repeatedly exclaiming, "This must be false," as she's reading the letter. "This cannot be. This must be the grossest falsehood." And when she had gone through the whole letter, though scarcely knowing anything of the last page or two, put it hastily away, protesting that she would not regard it, that she would never look on it again. So she doesn't accept anything that he said here. In this perturbed state of mind, with thoughts that could rest on nothing, she walked on, but it would not do. In half a minute, the letter was unfolded again, and collecting herself as well as she could, she again began the mortifying perusal, looking over of all that related to Wickham, and commanded herself so far as to examine the meaning of every sentence. So she's like looking at the letter, and she's like, he's just a liar. I don't believe anything. I'm never going to put this in. And she puts it away. I'm never going to look at this again. Can you believe he said that? Oh, what was it he said? And go back and get the letter and open it again, to read it again, to look over it again. So she just really outraged by what he has said, and then his explanation. And his explanation isn't humble. He's still so full of himself. And she just doesn't believe anything that he has to say. She's just all in a, flurry over the whole thing. The account of his connection with the Pemberley family was exactly, I read that. But when she read and reread with the closest attention the particulars immediately following of William's resigning all pretensions of the living, of his receiving in lieu so considerable a sum as £3,000, again was she forced to hesitate. She put down the letter, weighed every circumstance with what she meant to be impartiality, deliberated on the probability of each statement, but with little success. On both sides, it was only assertion. Again, she read on. But every line proved more clearly that the affair which she had believed it impossible that any contrivance could so represent as to render Mr. Darcy's conduct in it less than infamous. Infamous is to be famous for bad things, was capable of a turn which must make him entirely blameless throughout the whole. The extravagance and general profligacy which he scrupled not to lay to Mr. Wickham's charge, exceedingly shocked her, the more so as she could bring no proof of its injustice. She had never heard of him before his entrance into the shire militia, in which he had engaged at the persuasion of the young man, who, on meeting him accidentally in town, had there renewed a slight acquaintance. Of his former way of life, nothing had been known in Hertfordshire but what he told himself. As to his real character, had information been in her power, she had never felt a wish of inquiring. His countenance, voice, and manner had established him at once the possession of every virtue. She decided that she had judged him just on what he presented, on that he was attractive, he was well spoken, he was charming, and she's beginning to doubt herself. Like, I didn't know him before that. Nobody had heard of him, and we just all accepted him on face value because he was a good-looking guy. He presented himself well. She tried to recollect some instance of goodness, some distinguished trait of integrity or benevolence that might rescue him from the attacks of Mr. Darcy, or at least from the predominance of virtue, atone for those casual errors under which she would endeavor to class what Mr. Darcy had described as the idleness and vice of many years' continuance. But no such recollection befriended her. She could see him instantly before her in every charm of air and address, but she could remember no more substantial good than the general approbation of the neighborhood, and the regard which his social powers had gained him in the mass. After pausing on this point a considerable while, she once more continued to read. But alas, the story which followed of his designs on Miss Darcy received some confirmation from what had passed between Colonel Fitzwilliam and herself only the morning before, and at last she was referred for the truth of every particular to Colonel Fitzwilliam himself, from whom she had previously received the information of his near concern in all his cousin's affairs, and whose character she had no reason to question. Like, he has credibility. At one time, she had almost resolved on applying to him, but the idea was checked by the awkwardness of the application, and at length wholly banished by the conviction that Mr. Darcy would never have haphazard such a proposal if he had not been well assured of his cousin's cooperation. So she feels like it's probably true because the person he offered, his cousin, as his corroborating witness, would back him up. So she's like, there's no point me going to ask him about it because he's probably already determined that that would be a good witness. She perfectly remembered everything that had passed in conversation between Wickham and herself in their first evening at Mr. Phillip's. Many of his expressions were still fresh in her memory. She was now struck with the impropriety of such communications to a stranger, and wondered it had escaped her before, she starting to doubt him. She saw the indelicacy of putting himself forward as he had done, and the inconsistency of his professions with his conduct. She remembered that he had boasted of having no fear of seeing Mr. Darcy, that Mr. Darcy might leave the country, but that he should stand his ground. Yet he had avoided the Netherfield ball the very next week. She remembered also that till the Netherfield family had quitted the country, he told his story to no one but herself, but that after their removal, it had been everywhere discussed, that he had then no reserves, no scruples in sinking Mr. Darcy's character, though he had assured her that respect for the father would always prevent him exposing his son. So she's starting to really think about all the conversations in light of what Darcy's told her, and Wickham's coming up a little short in her mind. How differently did everything now appear in which he was concerned. His attentions to Miss King were now the consequence of views solely and hatefully mercenary, and the mediocrity of her fortune proved no longer the moderation of his wishes, but his eagerness to grasp at anything. His behavior to herself could now have had no tolerable motive. He had either been deceived with regard to her fortune, or had been gratifying his vanity by encouraging the preference which she believed she had most incautiously shown. Hey, Farid, I am on page 195. middle of 36. That's a new sound, that little dink sound. I knew you were going to ask. So I'm on 195, about to be on 196, about halfway through chapter 36. Now I lost my place anyway. Yeah. Toward the bottom of the page, if we're on the same page. His behavior to herself could now have been no tolerable motive. He had either been deceived with regard to her fortune, or had been gratifying his vanity by encouraging the preference which she believed she had most incautiously shown. Every lingering struggle in his favor grew fainter and fainter, and in further justification of Mr. Darcy. She could not but allow that Mr. Bingley, when questioned by Jane, had long ago asserted his blamelessness in the affair, that proud and repulsive as were his manners, she had never, in the whole course of their acquaintance, an acquaintance which had latterly brought them much together, and given her a sort of intimacy with his ways, seen anything that betrayed him to be unprincipled or unjust, anything that spoke him of irreligious or immoral habits, that among his own connections he was esteemed and valued, that even Wickham had allowed him merit as a brother, and that she had often heard him speak so affectionately of his sister as to prove him capable of some amiable feeling. So now she's also having to think through Darcy in a different light. Like, well, people that I respect him, and they do talk about him as being an honorable person. They don't show him as being a liar or doing anything that's self-serving. And he certainly does adore his sister and speak well of her. So maybe I have it wrong. Maybe Wickham wasn't this wonderful guy that I thought he was, and then Darcy is this horrible guy that I thought he was. She's having to rethink out of fairness. Um, She grew absolutely ashamed of herself. Of neither Darcy nor Wickham could she think without feeling that she had been blind, partial, prejudiced, absurd. How despicably have I acted, she cried. I, who have prided myself on my discernment. I, who have valued myself on my abilities, who have often disdained the generous candor of my sister and gratified my vanity in useless or blamable distrust. How humiliating is this discovery! Yet how just a humiliation. How fair this like I deserve this humiliation. Had I been in love, I could not have been more wretchedly blind. But vanity, not love, has been my folly. Pleased with the preference of one and offended by the neglect of the other. Remember, when she first met Darcy, she got her feelings hurt because he said there was nobody attractive that he would want to dance with. And when she first met Wickham, he was very flattering and paid a lot of attention to her. So she's saying, I was prejudiced, I was blinded by my own sense of self, my own ego. Till this moment, I never knew myself. Self discovery, such a big part of literature. From herself to Jane, from Jane to Bingley, her thoughts were in a line which soon brought her to recollection that Mr. Darcy's explanation there had appeared very insufficient, and she read it again. She's rereading the part where he explains why he interfered with her sister's relationship. While widely different was the effect of the second perusal, how could she deny that credit to his assertions? In one instance, which she had been obliged to give in the other, he declared himself to have been totally unsuspicious of her sister's attachment, and she could not help remembering what Charlotte's opinion had always been. Neither could she deny the justice of his description of Jane. She felt that Jane's feelings, though fervent, were little displayed, and that there was a constant complacency in her air and manner, not often united with great sensibility. When she came to that part of the letter in which her family were mentioned in terms of such mortifying yet merited reproach, her sense of shame was severe. The justice of the charge struck her too forcefully for denial, and the circumstances to which he particularly alluded as having passed at the Netherfield ball, and as confirming all his first disapprobation, could not have made a stronger impression on his mind than on hers. She's having to begrudgingly admit that the conclusions he drew about her sister are accurate. The compliment to herself and her sister was not unfelt. It soothed, but it could not console her for the contempt which had been thus self-attracted by the rest of her family. And as she considered that Jane's disappointment had been, in fact, the work of her nearest relations, and reflected how materially the credit of both must be hurt by such impropriety of conduct, she felt depressed beyond anything she had ever known before. After wandering along the lane for 2 hours, giving way to every variety of thought, reconsidering events, determining probabilities, and reconciling herself, as well as she could, to a change so sudden and so important, fatigue and a recollection of her long absence made her at length return home. She she wandered thinking about this for 2 hours. The only reason she went home was because she was exhausted from it all, and the resolution of repressing such reflections as must make her unfit for conversation. She was immediately told that the two gentlemen from Rossings had each called during her absence. Mr. Darcy only for a few minutes to take leave, but that Colonel Fitzwilliam had been sitting with them at least an hour, hoping for her return, and almost resolving to walk after her till she'd been found. Elizabeth could but just affect concern in missing him. She really rejoiced at it. Colonel Fitzwilliam was no longer an object. She could think only of the letter. Well, we're 21 minutes in. The next chapter is not very long, and as I'm curious to know what she wants to do, why did Darcy come back? See, I don't think he's done with her. I think, now I have read the book, so I'm a little prejudiced, but I don't remember the details. Why does he keep coming back? He really doesn't play his hand very clearly. It's hard to know what he truly thinks. Does he really like her? Does he not like her? What's the deal? And why is Colonel Fitzwilliam, his cousin, there? So, chapter 37. The two gentlemen left Rossings the next morning, and Mr. Collins, having been in waiting near the lodges to make them his parting obeisance, was able to bring home the pleasing intelligence of their appearing in very good health and in as tolerable spirits as could be expected after the melancholy scene so lately gone through at Rossings. To Rossings he then hastened to console Lady Catherine and her daughter, and on his return brought back with great satisfaction a message from her ladyship, importing that she felt herself so dull as to make her very desirous of having them all to dine with her. Elizabeth could not see Lady Catherine without recollecting that she had chosen it. She might by this time have been presented to her as her future niece, nor could she think without a smile of what her ladyship's indignation would have been. So now maybe she's showing some regret. Wow, if I'd acted differently, I would be going now back to Lady Catherine as the fiancée of Darcy. Elizabeth could not see Lady Catherine. Oh, I read that. What would she have said? How would she have behaved? Were questions with which she amused herself. Their first subject was the diminutive, it's raining, I don't know if you can hear it, diminutive of the Rossings party. I assure you, I feel it exceedingly, said Lady Catherine. I believe nobody feels the loss of friends so much as I do, but I'm particularly attached to these young men, and know them to be so much attached to me. They were excessively sorry to go, but so they always are. The dear Colonel rallied his spirits tolerably till just at last, but Darcy seemed to feel it most acutely, more, I think, than last year. His attachment to Rosings certainly increases. Mr. Collins had a compliment and an allusion to throw in here, which were kindly smiled on by the mother and daughter. Lady Catherine observed after dinner that Miss Bennet seemed out of spirits, immediately accounting for it herself by supposing that she did not like to go home again so soon. She added, but if that is the case, you must write to your mother to beg that you may stay a little longer. Mrs. Collins will be very glad of your company, I'm sure. So she thinks that Elizabeth's sad about having to leave the Collinses' company. I'm very much obliged to your ladyship for your kind invitation, replied Elizabeth, but it is not in my power to accept it. I must be in town next Saturday. Why, at that rate, you will have only been here 6 weeks. I expected you to stay 2 months. Hey, Kelly. 2 months. I told Mrs. Collins so before you came. There can be no occasion for your going so soon. Mrs. Bennet could certainly spare you for another fortnight, but my father cannot. He wrote last week to hurry my return. Oh, your father, of course, may spare you if your mother can. Daughters are never of so much consequence to a father. Very important statement of culture. daughters aren't as significant to fathers as sons are. They don't have any value. So why would the father care if the daughter came back or not? Lady Catherine is showing her A, representation of society of the day, and B, lack of understanding of who Elizabeth is. Um, And if you will stay another month complete, it will be in my power to take one of you as far as London, for I'm going there early in June for a week. And as Dawson does not object to the barouche box, there will be very good room for one of you. And indeed, if the weather should happen to be cool, I should not object to taking you both, as neither of you are large. You are all kindness, madame, but I believe we must abide by our original plan. Lady Catherine seemed resigned. Mrs. Collins, you must send a servant with them. You know I always speak my mind, and I cannot bear the idea of two young women traveling post by themselves. It is highly improper. Improper. I thought I was going to say important, so I misread that. You must contrive to send somebody. I have the greatest dislike in the world to that sort of thing. Young women should always be properly guarded and attended according to their situation in life. When my niece Georgiana went to Ramsgate last summer, I made a point of her having two men servants go with her. Miss Darcy, the daughter of Mr. Darcy of Pemberley, and Lady Anne could not have appeared with propriety in a different manner. I'm excessively attentive to all those things. You must send John with the young ladies, Mrs. Collins. I'm glad it occurred to me to mention it, for it would be really discreditable to you to let them go alone. My uncle is to send a servant for us. Oh, your uncle. He keeps a manservant, does he? I'm very glad you have somebody who thinks of those things. Where shall you change horses? Oh, Bromley, of course. If you mention my name at the bell, they will attend to you. You will be attended to. Lady Catherine had many other questions to ask respecting their journey, and as she did not answer them all herself, attention was necessary, which Elizabeth believed to be lucky for her, or with a mind so occupied she might have forgotten where she was. Reflection must be reserved for solitary hours. Whenever she was alone, she gave way to it as the greatest relief, and not a day went by without a solitary walk, in which she might indulge in all the delight of unpleasant recollections. Mr. Darcy's letter she was in a fair way of soon knowing by heart. She studied every sentence, and her feelings toward its writers were sometimes widely different. When she remembered the style of his address, she was still full of indignation. But when she considered how unjustly she had condemned and upbraided is like criticized him, her anger was turned against herself, and his disappointed feelings became the object of compassion. His attachment excited gratitude, his general character respect, but she could not approve him, nor could she for a moment repent her refusal or feel the slightest inclination ever to see him again. So she doesn't, it's not like she's interested in him, but she can't make peace with this letter and her behavior. She's trying to sort it all out. In her own past behavior, there was a constant source of vexation and regret, and in the unhappy defects of her family, a subject of yet heavier chagrin. They were hopeless infirmity. Her father, contented with laughing at them, would never exert himself to restrain the wild giddiness of his youngest daughters. And her mother, with manners so far from right herself, was entirely insensible of the evil. Elizabeth frequently united with Jane in an endeavor to check the imprudence of Catherine and Lydia. But while they were supported by their mother's indulgence, what chance could there be of improvement? Catherine, weak-spirited, irritable, and completely under Lydia's guidance, had always affronted by their advice. And Lydia, self-willed and careless, would scarcely give them a hearing. They were ignorant, idle, and vain. While there was an officer in Meryton, they would flirt with him, and while Meryton was within a walk of Longbourn, they would be going there forever. Anxiety on Jane's behalf was another prevailing concern, and Mr. Darcy's explanation by restoring Bingley to all her former good opinion heightened the sense of what Jane had lost. His affection was proved to have been sincere, and his conduct cleared of all blame, unless any could attach to the implicitness of his confidence in his friend. How grievous then was the thought that, of a situation so desirable in every respect, So replete with advantage, so promising for happiness, Jane had been deprived by the folly and indecorum of her own family. When to these recollections was added the development of Wickham's character, it may be easily believed that the happy spirits which had seldom been depressed before were now so much affected as to make it almost impossible for her to appear tolerably cheerful. Their engagements at Rosen's were as frequent during the last week of her stay as they had been at the first. The very last evening was spent there, and her ladyship again inquired minutely into the particulars of their journey, gave them directions as to the best method of packing, and was so urgent on the necessity of placing gowns in the only right way that Maria thought herself obliged, on her return, to undo all the work of the morning and pack her trunk afresh. When they parted, Lady Catherine, with great condescension, wished them a good journey and invited them to come to Hunsford again next year. And Mr. Borg exerted herself so far as to curtsy and hold out her hand to both. And that we stop. 202. What's our final page? 368. So 150 pages to go. 100, more than that. 160 pages to go. Thank you for being here. My cousin, Brenda, if you're still out there, keep quilting. That's just something I admire. I have one of Mama's. It's got the front and it's got the back and it's got the filler or whatever you call the insert, but it's not been quilted. And I've been trying to decide what to do with it. I'm not going to quilt it because I don't have that ability. But if that's something you're interested in doing, maybe we can communicate about that. That would be super. So you can send me something on Messenger. To the rest, it's so fun. Dylan, I didn't know you were doing Pride and Prejudice. Oh, good. I'm glad it's here for you. It'll be ready for you when you're ready later in the year. I can't believe that you high schoolers are almost to the end of this semester or this crazy break. The year, as slow as it's gone, it's going by so quickly too. I appreciate you guys being here. Don't forget to subscribe, smash the live button so you know when I'm reading live so you can join me if you want to. I'm better pieced than a quilter. That was her favorite part to do too, Brenda. She loved to come with clever ideas and all. And some of our friends, if I know how to get in touch with them, have the machine to do all the quilting. Toward the end, Mama used the machine, but originally she only hand quilted. And I have both examples of her work. My knitting needs a lot of practice, but it's very calming to me. So I'm going to try again when the new needles come in. Tell my cousin hi, your brother. I don't know if you want me to say, I mean, your name is obviously here. So, but tell Tommy, I love seeing the pictures of his grandchildren on Facebook. And those of you that want to know when I read, smash the bell, because that'll tell you that I'm live. And Kelly, we'll chat again soon. I'm probably going to go put on some Christmas music and start thinking about decorating. I don't want to go up in the attic, but I've got to do it because that's where all the decorations are. I hope you guys are having a wonderful holiday season, as strange as it is. Just keep doing the things that keep your mind in a positive place. Build on your faith, practice your meditation, whatever it is that brings you strength, dwell on it. Find your hobbies, like mine is this YouTube channel. It connects you unexpectedly with cousins that you've lost track. I mean, haven't lost track, but it's just such a great surprise to see my cousin here. Feels weird too, because I was the baby cousin, so I think she's like, oh, my crazy cousin's reading a book on YouTube. So enjoy your evening, enjoy your Sunday, enjoy your holiday season, and I will read to you next time. See ya.